we're starting a 2-episode series, just kind of talking through what discipleship is, what it looks like, and some ways to go about it. So today we're going to be talking about inward or self-discipleship, focusing on ourselves, making sure we are being disciples, and then looking outward towards discipling others as we are called to do. So before we get into this whole conversation of what self-discipleship is, what discipling others is, maybe we could just talk a little bit about what discipleship is in the first place. By the way, I'm here with Abel.
What's up?
And I'm Zach. And it's just us two today. So
no Lauren.
No Lauren. She's
a busy gal.
She's a busy gal. She's got a lot on her plate, and she's doing great things. So, Abel, what would you say when you think about discipleship? What comes to mind? What is discipleship?
Yeah. Shout out to John Mark Comer. I know probably every single young adult is reading him right now, and every single person in most churches are reading him. But I'm reading his book right now called Practicing the Way. And it's all about following Jesus. And that sounds so general, but the first part of his book, honestly, the whole book is really all about discipleship. But it really goes into an in-depth. It's probably one of the most in-depth. He's able to grasp discipleship in a way that is so practical and understandable. So, like, in essence, discipleship at its simplest form is becoming like someone else, right? So discipleship isn't necessarily a Christian or Christianity only word, right? Discipleship just means that you are being formed into something. So you can become, if you think about it, when you're an apprentice in a trade, you're being discipled to work that trade. When you are an apprentice or a disciple at a sport, you are becoming an athlete that's going to perfect that sport. And so discipleship isn't limited to Christianity. We think discipleship and we think Christianity, but it's really not limited to only Christianity. And so in its simplest form, it's becoming like someone and being trained. He uses the word, actually, instead of a disciple, he uses apprentice. I really like New Life's language is mentorship. We use that mentorship because it's more, It's more tangible. Like, we understand mentorship quicker than we probably understand discipleship, even though they're the same thing. So yeah, that's what I would say discipleship in the simplest form, right? It's becoming like someone and being almost trained and shaped into something and someone. So yeah, how about yourself? What do you think?
Yeah, I love that. That's I would say a very similar thing. Yeah, I like the way you framed it, because it's not just like following a certain set of ideas or principles or things. It's being shaped into something specific, formed by someone. Yeah, there's someone that is shaping you.
It's very intentional.
Yes, so you're following someone, not just a set of ideas. That's especially true when it comes to our faith as followers of Jesus, is we are being discipled by Jesus through, or mentored by Jesus through all of these mentors. So
different mediums and all that.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone who's maybe watching this podcast and thinking, maybe they're not a believer, or they're an early believer, or maybe you're a believer, but they have the mindset that I was never discipled by anything or anyone. What would you? Whoa! I just hit my mic. What would you say to someone who's having that thought, or maybe is thinking that way?
Yeah, I would just point out that when you think of discipleship, as you explained it, as being shaped and formed by someone, it's just simply true. This is something that John Mark Comer points out. It's just part of the human nature to be influenced and shaped by things outside of us. Yeah. And it's just part of who we are. So we latch on to things. We latch on to people. We latch on to leaders. We latch on to ideas. Yeah. We latch on to groups, communities, and all of those things influence who we are, what we believe, what we do, and the values that we have. Totally. And so whether you can be discipled by an influencer on Instagram or on TikTok that you really like appreciate what they say. You watch their videos and you're like, man, this person really gets me, or they've been through what I've been through. And so you're listening to them. You can be discipled or influenced by someone who, like a podcast host that you like. I don't know, we got like Joe Rogan, Tim Ross, like these influential podcasters who have this large following, who are in their way discipling people.
Oh, for sure.
Because people are listening to them. They're changing their lives based on what they hear from the advice they give. They're being shaped, and their values and ideas are being influenced by them. So you can be influenced by CNN, by Fox News. That's one of the biggest problems we have in the church right now in America. You can be influenced by a parent, discipled by a teacher, a coach, like you were mentioning. So once you start to think of discipleship as being shaped and formed by someone into some kind of into being like someone, then you start to realize like, I've been shaped in so many ways through the music I listen to and all this kind of stuff. So I'd say we're more easily influenced and more shaped than we realize at times.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I would just tell a quick story. I back in 2020, like during COVID, everyone was locked down. I was living in Phoenix, and I have never been into van life, but all of a sudden I came across a van life video and it hooked me to the point where I was like, I might quit ministry and go straight into van life and do this van life thing, because I was so, and honestly, to a certain extent, still am. Don't want to quit ministry. Love it here. But to a certain extent, I'm like, wow, like that is so appealing to me. And I've been following a guy since 2020, like one dude who lives in his van for 4 years. I've been following him, have watched every video for the past 4 years because, but what is he doing? In a sense, unknowingly, he's influencing me and shaping me. I'm not going out and buying a van and doing all these things, but I was never even thinking about buying a van or living in a van or doing van life. And then I've come across this YouTube channel that hooks me, and now I'm being shaped and formed. My thoughts are being shaped and formed first.
Yeah, I totally. I have the same thing during COVID. I'm not much of a gamer. I started watching these. I don't even want to say what it is. It's so embarrassing. But I started watching these videos of people playing video games. I think I just was stumbling upon it through Instagram. It was just serving it to me on my algorithm, and I got hooked. And I was like, whoa. And what I realized is it was these group of people who would play games together often. And so I would watch this one guy, but he's like chatting with all these other friends. And I started to realize, like, why am I so almost even addicted to it? Like, I'm just watching it constantly.
Yep.
And I realized it's because I wanted the community and friendship that they were experiencing while they were playing games that I did not have when I was during COVID and we were isolated and all these things. I missed my friends from like California, from college, things like that. And I realized through watching this, I'm getting some kind of experience that is fulfilling a desire or a longing in me. Yeah. And I got like,
yeah, what's the game, Zach? What's the game?
All right. It was Among Us. Oh, man. I'm a youth pastor.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, but then that's what it started at. And I was like super against Among Us too, because like, this is just popular for no reason. I started watching it. It's like, whoa, this is actually like
hilarious.
Yeah. It was more the people than the game. But I think people can take us in. Yeah. And we start to feel this. We're as humans, we're made to connect, and we feel this connection with people who give us wisdom, who help us to see life differently, who give us hope, who, what you're saying, they captured your imagination.
Yeah. Totally.
What if I lived in a van and drove across the country? Yeah. And there's so many things that capture our imaginations. Yeah. And when our imaginations are captured, that shapes how we imagine everything.
Yeah. And I think you bring up a key point. A discipleship starts in the mind, right? It always starts with a thought. It never starts with you feeling an affection towards something. It always starts with, oh, that looks interesting, or you notice something, but it always starts in the mind. It makes sense why it always starts in the mind and why scripture is so, is so persistent, talks so much about the mind, renewing the mind, right? Romans and all over scripture, you see how our minds, and it uses this language of the heart, but I think that what scripture is trying to show us is that deep within us, right, our heart, our mind, but not our heart in the sense of emotions, our heart in like the innermost being of us, and where our thoughts come from, where where we find our inner identity is where we start to become discipled by all these things. It's when you start to allow these things, good or bad things, but you allow them into that inner place, then they start to formulate the thoughts that then play out into attitudes or behaviors and actions. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think thought pairs with desire and longing, and then that creates this catalyst, this mixture, this chemical compound that starts to have changes in the rest of you. Oh, now I come across this thought, it meets a desire, and then so I start to act and behave in ways that are in line with these thoughts and desires, or what I want to be, things like that.
Something really interesting that I was reading about. Sorry for all the coughing, something's in my throat. Something I was reading in John Mark Comer's book that was really interesting to me was that when Jesus was here and he was, back in, it's still now in Jewish tradition, a lot of these teachers are called rabbis, right? So if you ever hear the word rabbi, they're referring to a teacher, maybe a specific type of teacher that I don't know, but you might know more about that, but it's definitely a teacher, right? And so Jesus was this teacher, and a lot of the guys, the way that John Mark points it out, is that a lot of the guys that Jesus called to be his 12 disciples, where Jewish people had to go through these schooling growing up, and it was super intense. And the higher you got, the more intense it became, and the more selective it became. And so the guys who would graduate from this school would end up becoming rabbis, but the guys who didn't would end up becoming fishermen and doing normal trade work. And so what Comer points out that I really loved is that Jesus went to these men who hadn't succeeded in this tradition, this Jewish tradition of doing school, which was it was like the successful people of today's world, right? Like the people who were graduating to be rabbis. Rabbis were they were the stuff. They were you were him if you were a rabbi, right? And so these guys who were not, who had fallen off the sides because they weren't smart enough, they didn't have the tenacity, whatever it was, right? Jesus, because I always wonder, how, I know that scripture doesn't give us all the details of how things happen, right? But it was just so interesting to me that Jesus, anytime he would say, "Come and follow me," they would just get up and go. And Comer really put that into perspective, because what he said was these guys were so not wanted by the Pharisee and that whole community and being a rabbi and all that stuff, that when Jesus, who had gone through all of this and was actually a rabbi, called them out, it was this really profound they couldn't bear to imagine that a rabbi would ever call them to follow them, because you had to be worthy of following a rabbi. You had to have almost the credibility to follow. Not anybody could just follow a rabbi. It was a very, that process was very specific and very selective. And so the fact that these men were being called out, being fishermen, that's what makes it such a big deal. I understood it, but I never really fully understood it. And so to tie it back into discipleship, Jesus, the ultimate rabbi, right, calls us, all of us, into an intentional relationship with him. And through that relationship is where discipleship starts to form. And when you start to get mentored, you start to get shaped by him. But he invites us all into it. It's not a selective for the best, for the people who work at churches, for the high capacity leaders. It's not for the volunteers who serve all their time at the church. It's for everybody to enter into an intentional relationship with him. And I think that, for me, discipleship, more than just closeness to something and someone, it's a relationship with something and someone is where it stems.
Yeah, I love that. What kind of stood out to me as you were saying that is, just where it meets us and how we usually think of those stories of Jesus calling the disciples. Yeah. We typically highlight, when we talk about discipleship and following Jesus, we typically highlight the sacrifice and the cost of discipleship. And wow, the disciples, they left everything behind and all that stuff, which is true. They did. They immediately followed. It's very much an immediate kind of thing. Yep. But along with that, so not not that that's not true,
Yeah.
but along with that, there's this idea that it's this huge honor.
Yeah, it is.
To follow Jesus, to be chosen, to be, for Jesus to say, hey, I want you to follow me, and I want to pour into your life, give you life, shape you into someone who you could be, that is beautiful and powerful, and to be a part of something bigger than yourself. Powerful as in like able to break through the powers of darkness. And because the power that Jesus uses is power that serves other people. Just to clarify that. But we often think about the sacrifice of discipleship and not the honor of discipleship. And to think, wow, like Jesus wants someone like me with him in that intentional relationship.
I even think, like, now that you're bringing that up, I'm even thinking like, all the people that I let influence me genuinely let me influence me for good. Like, I'm thinking my youth pastor, my leaders and mentors growing up, it was an honor to let them influence me. Like, I didn't have this sense of like, I'm sacrificing and like I got to give up my thoughts. I'm like, no, I want to give up my thoughts. Like, being shaped by you and being formed by you is an honor to do so. So that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about it like that.
Super interesting, man. We could probably talk a lot more on this. But to this episode is specifically about we're using the language self-discipleship or inner discipleship. Probably not the best language, what we're talking about, it to be clear, is how do we make sure that we are being discipled? Discipled and being disciples. What are decisions we can make in our own lives, the decisions we have control over, to make sure that we are, having this, pouring into this intentional relationship with Jesus that he's calling us into, being shaped by the things that are healthy and beautiful, and not by things that are unhealthy or beautiful. So maybe we can talk about just, well, why is this important? I mean, we kind of have been getting into that, but why is it important for me, for those of you who are listening? Why is it important for you to make this decision? And what does it look like? So maybe let's just start with the idea of making sure you are. Why do we need that?
I think if you're a follower of Jesus, it's not a matter of if you feel like being discipled by Jesus and being mentored by Jesus. It's a matter of when are you doing that? Like, it's not a suggestion. The scripture doesn't make it a suggestion. I'm talking to believers here, right? So if you're a genuine follower of Jesus, you love Jesus, he's your Lord, he's your priest, he's your king, then there is a command to become shaped by him. Because when we are shaped by him, we then can share the love and be Jesus to other people, right? Not in the sense that we can save people, but in the sense that we can love people to the fullest degree, right? And so I think it's incredibly, incredibly important to be, if you're a follower of Jesus, to be discipled and mentored, whether that's, we can talk about mediums and vehicles of discipleship in a bit, but you must be discipled and be in an intentional relationship with God. It's not a matter of if or if you feel like it. It's a matter of devoting yourself to it. I just preached on Acts 2. At the end of Acts 2, the disciples devoted themselves to teaching and to fellowship and to prayer and to breaking of bread. And that word devoted has nothing to do with they felt like being devoted. They chose to be devoted. And so I think it's incredibly important. Like, how do we expect to bring heaven to earth if we don't know the person who brought heaven to earth in the first place?
Yeah, I like that and that idea of devoted. I was just thinking right now about like, we were kind of talking about discipleship as being shaped into something or someone, and just thinking about the end goal of whatever is shaping you and forming you. I don't know. I was kind of trying to put my thoughts together. Here's what I was thinking. Trying to make sense of this. Is that there's always some kind of, I guess the question is, who do you want to become? What do you want to be? What do you want to be a part of? And are you thinking that way about the things that you're allowing to influence and shape you? So I'm just thinking about the greatest mentors are the ones that we can look to their life and say, I want to replicate some aspect of their life in my own life.
Yep.
And say, oh man, that person that person is extremely kind to other people. I want to be kind like that. That person is really successful in communicating their thoughts. I want to communicate like that. And so I am going to listen to them. I'm going to grab coffee with them. I'm going to read the book that they wrote, listen to the podcast they lead, whatever. And just thinking about like, when you think about Jesus, it's great because we already have he's like the greatest goal you can really think of. Well, the reason why that's highlighted for me is because there's so many people I've looked up to in my life. Yeah. Or like, let's say like an author. I'll use an author so it's not super personal, but there's this author I really, really liked reading, and he shaped a lot of who I was. And even who I am today still, like he has shaped me. But through reading his books, listening to his speeches, all these things. And then after he died, it came out that he was, while he was alive, was extremely abusive in many ways. And a lot of stuff came to light about his life that really shook me, especially because of his influence over me. And I started to question a lot of like his influence and things. And since then, I have not been able to read any of his books or to like listen to his stuff or whatever. He was unrepentant to the grave. That's a whole nother conversation, what we do with people who have fallen. But that was just my experience of this particular scenario. So that's always something. I'm not trying to cast distrust on like the people we look up to. But there's always, when we are shaped by people in this life, there's always an imperfection about it. There's always, even though we look at their lives and say, oh, there's so much beauty about who you are that I want to replicate in my life. There's always going to be things that you have to sift through and say, oh, that maybe that person's still growing in this area, or that person, or even this person is going to end up showing themselves not to be all you thought. That will never happen with Jesus. That's what I'm trying to highlight here. When you think about who is my ultimate goal of who I want to be like, what I want to be shaped into, we already have a comprehensive image of who Jesus is in Scripture. And that image that we have of who he is, this beautiful God, this beautiful servant, we have someone who is from beginning to end worthy of imitation, worthy of following, worthy of being shaped and influenced by, someone who will never let you down like your mentors or leaders or people have let you down. So just thinking through that aspect of discipleship. And when I think about making sure I'm being discipled, it kind of feels a little bit selfish. Trying to pour into myself and things like that. And so I don't know if anybody listening feels that way too, but when we're asking you, hey, make sure you're discipling yourself, that kind of feels self-focused. But as I was thinking about this, I was thinking about every plane ride I've been on. And that security, the speech, the safety thing. And they talk about the oxygen mask. If anything happens and the oxygen mask falls from the compartment above you, always make sure to put your mask on before turning to your neighbor, your child, someone next to you who needs it. And that always feels like, that feels selfish. I'm gonna save myself first. But the reason is, if you focus so much on someone else, like your child, 5-year-old next to you or whatever, you're actually putting yourself at risk to where you might pass out or whatever. And now you're unable to help anyone around you because your own well-being has been sacrificed. And rather than making sure you're well and healthy so that you can then pour into others around you, make sure that they're healthy and well. And that's kind of the image I was thinking about as I was thinking about this self-discipleship. This is why it's not selfish. 1, it's because God has called us into it. 2, because you need to be healthy. You need to be. God has called you to healthiness. That doesn't mean you're always happy, but it means you're healthy. And when you're unhealthy, you're presenting that to God. You're coming to God so that you can be made well, spiritually, emotionally. And then that allows you then to pour into others. And then 3, even your self-discipleship is never an individual, solely by yourself kind of pursuit.
Two thoughts real quick before we move into like ways of being discipled. One, I was out getting coffee with a friend a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about being a man and just like, you know, having an authentic conversation about manlyhood and, you know, what that looks like as a believer and follower of Jesus. And I asked my buddy, I was like, when you think of the manliest man, who do you think of? And, you know, he started listing people, and I was like, well, I think of Jesus. In every capacity of being a man, Jesus is the perfect example of each of those areas of being a man. Provider, protector, manly, whatever your characteristics, whatever the characteristics may be. In the healthiest sense, Jesus is the perfect example and the best example of what it means to be a man. And so why wouldn't I want to be shaped by him? Why wouldn't I want to be influenced by him? Why wouldn't I want him to speak into what it means to be a man at this point of time in history, at this point in my life? Of course I would want him to be, because he's the, like you said, there's never gonna be anything that comes out. There hasn't been for 2,000 years that comes out that Jesus wasn't perfect, that he wasn't who he says he was. And in fact, there's actually tons of evidence that shows that he is exactly who he says he was. There's evidence of the resurrection. There's evidence of Jesus's life. There's evidence, you know, and so why wouldn't I want to be shaped by the perfect man to ever exist and walk this world? And my second thought was Matthew, at the end of Matthew, when Jesus talks about go and make disciples of all nations. One of the reasons we get discipled by Christ, one of the reasons we allow him to shape us, is because we're not called to make believers of people, we're called to make disciples of people. And we will only know how to make a disciple if we ourselves are being discipled. Going back to your mask analogy, right? You can't help others and shape others in the power of Christ, for Christ, and for his glory if you are not yourself experiencing that same shaping and formation. Yeah, so just a couple thoughts I had.
Yeah.
As you were talking.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so let's get in with we got a few minutes left. Let's talk about what are some ways that we can make sure that we are being discipled. By the way, I love that you Jesus juked your friend that in that conversation. You brought out the Jesus card.
He was like, he felt,
Jesus. I should have said Jesus.
But he even mentioned it. He was like, yeah, honestly, I wasn't thinking about Jesus at all. And so it was like, he was like, man, that's like honestly challenging me a little bit. I'm like, that's good. Anyways, some of the ways that we can become discipled, right? Some of the vehicles to do that. This is in no particular like importance order, just like listing them. Community and being around others is one of the ways that you will be able to be discipled. The Lord uses other people, mentors, friends, family, whoever it is, your local church community, to help disciple you. When you expose yourself to community, and you allow yourself to be vulnerable, authentic, and transparent, and you allow people in, it's going to hurt at times, but it will allow for you to be discipled. Some other vehicles, obviously spending time in the Word. One thing that Comer talks about is this reality of like, we're such a multitasking culture and people, and that we don't even realize we're multitasking when we're multitasking. And one of the practices that I've been putting into place in my own walk is like, when I spend time with the Lord, I'm not looking at my phone. I'm not thinking other thoughts. Like, even if I do have another thought about something else, I surrender it immediately. I'm like, Lord, like, I just want all my thoughts right now to be on you. Lord, I want all my attention to be on you. I want to be fixed and focused on you right now. And that, there's something about that. I mean, you go to coffee with someone, right? And if that person's on their phone the whole time, that's not going to be a really fun conversation. And there's not going to be a lot of growth and relational connection that comes out of that. But when you're focused on the conversation, you're there with them, and you're asking questions, you guys are going back and forth, that relational equity starts to grow. And so I've noticed a shift in my relationship with the Lord, where there's like a deeper intimacy, because I'm like intentionally focusing on God and aware of his presence in a way that I hadn't been before. And it's been very sweet. Some other ways, podcasts, books, everything that you let in is influencing you to some degree. And so what type of content you let in will heavily influence you.
Yeah, that's great. Totally agree with all those I was thinking about community as a big part of this, and just thinking about why that's important is just that if my discipleship, if my following Jesus, if my being shaped and formed rests solely if I'm doing it just by myself, I'm just an individual. I don't need community. I'm good on my own.
Yep.
If that's the case, then it's going to fail, because there are times when I do not want to do what I need to do. When I do not feel like doing what is healthy for me, when I don't have the passion, I don't have the desire, I don't have the willpower to do what needs to be done, or even the perspective and the insight to see clearly. I'm reminded of that. This illustration has been used in so many different ways, but just reminded of this illustration of different blind men feeling an elephant.
Oh yeah.
Have you heard this? Yeah. And they're all feeling different parts of the elephant, trying to identify what they're feeling. And one is feeling the trunk, and they're like, "Oh, this is what we're feeling. This is it's long and flexible like a hose." And another person feels the ear, and it's like, "No, it's large and flat like a palm frond." Or this other guy's feeling the leg. It's like, "No, it's like a tree trunk." And one's feeling the side, and it's like, "No, it's just a solid wall." They're all feeling different sides of the elephant and identifying things about it. Yeah. But none of them have the whole picture. But what if they were to like talk to each other and be like, "Oh, okay, so all of this is the same thing," which means it has all of these. I guess I'm stretching this illustration, but just thinking, what if we work together to identify this thing that I cannot identify by myself? Yeah. And what if we had someone who like could see? Yeah. And could identify the elephant and say, "Hey, you're actually feeling one animal here." Yeah. And it has all of those things combined, and it's this. And that just kind of reminds me of just community of, we have someone who sees life clearly. We have Jesus who sees the whole thing clearly. And then we have each other to help each other identify things that we may not be seeing clearly just because we have a narrow view of the situation or our life or whatever it is. And so that I think it's so important to be in community and to submit yourself, like you said, to other people's perspectives, other people's advice and wisdom. Especially, I've seen this so much in relationships. What happens in relationships is like people get so caught up in their significant other, they withdraw from community, focus solely on the other person. Yeah. And then they're all these kind of red flags start to pop up, but because they are isolated, they don't see them happening, and they just go into this toxic cycle, this toxic relationship. And I've seen people in community who are saying, "Hey, I don't know if you've noticed this, but there's we're just concerned about the way this relationship is carrying out. We've just noticed this." And then you're able to see, "Oh, I was kind of, blinded by my love and infatuation, and you helped me to see that this was actually contributing to their unhealth and my unhealth."
Yeah. Can I just call out a couple people that probably the type of people that don't want to be in community? Not certain people.
I thought you were going to call it names. Here's some people I need to talk to about this.
No. People who can't time manage. And so they waste their time, and then you don't have time for community and time to go to a life group or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be a life group, but you don't get time to get plugged into community. And then you got people who don't want to submit and like hear other people's opinions and advice or have accountability or have people looking. And so you just want to be isolated, right? So I think those two are like the big ones that stand out to me. Like people who say, "Oh, it's like I'm too busy," or "I just can't find the time," or I don't know where to get plugged in." It's like, I think there's a lot of people who are just bad at time managing and don't want to live in like an accountability or like in a like transparent setting, And so if that's you, I would encourage you and challenge you, get plugged in somewhere, manage your calendar, and figure out what's the best time for you to find community. I've seen very busy parents of toddlers find community. Like if you're single and don't have kids, you have time for community.
Yeah, definitely. And that's part of the discipleship process, is making those priorities, saying, "Hey, I'm prioritizing my growth in my relationship with God and with others." And if you're isolated, you might think, I don't need anybody else. Like I'm good. The thing is, you're probably just not seeing the ways that you need to grow, and community will bring that out. So Yeah, maybe as we kind of come to a close, we gave a couple practical things. One of the most important ways I've grown, and I know this is true of you as well, is growing just through mentors.
Yeah.
And specific people in our lives who've been able to pour into our life, people we can ask advice to, people we can just lay it all out and say, here's what I'm struggling with. Do you have any wisdom or advice?
Yep.
So I think we both highly recommend finding someone who can mentor you.
Yep.
What would you say to people who want that but don't know how to go about it? How would you recommend people go about finding a mentor?
Yeah, I would say the first spiritual answer: pray about it. Ask the Lord to bring someone to mind or to connect you with someone. The Lord knows exactly what you need when you need it, and so He'll find you the best mentor, even if it's the one that you don't think would be the best mentor. So be open to that. I would say, talk to, if you're part of a local church, there are tons of wise people who are already at your local church, and you may know who they are. Once you're ready to once you identify someone, you can either find someone through, maybe there are other friends who are being mentored. Ask your friends if they have mentors, and if none of your friends have mentors, that should tell you something about your friends. Look at maybe, leaders in the church, people who are significant leaders in the church, like their presence, they're around a lot, they've been involved for a while. Ask around. You got to do some work. Like there is some legwork to this. It's not just like, I want to get mentored, and you just sit there. And it's like, no, bro, like, okay, you got to go do the legwork now. Half the battle is wanting to, now the other half is going to find the mentor, right? Mm-hmm. And then once you're ready to make the ask, I would say sometimes it depends on who it is, right? Some mentors, can't commit to a long-term thing. So just be flexible. I would say be flexible and open and work around their schedule. Like if you're serious about this, like do everything you can to meet them where they're at, in a sense. Work around their schedule, meet when they can meet for the period of time that they can meet. Maybe it's 30 minutes, maybe it's an hour, and then maybe it's only a year-long mentorship, 3 months, 6 months. Like be flexible. And then I would say get a couple. Like if you can, get a couple. 2 to 3 mentors, I would say is the ideal, because then even mentors have different perspectives, and you can hear multiple point of views. I just read in Proverbs today that in a council there's wisdom, right? In a council of mentors and council of leaders, council of people, there's wisdom. So that's what I would say. Yeah. And what do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that. My big struggle has been in the past, I've gone through seasons of not having mentors. Yeah. And I've felt that, having had really strong mentors and then not having them, I was like, whoa, like I need someone to help me here. I need someone that I can come to, someone to push me. And I felt the lack of it. My biggest hiccup was not wanting to burden someone by asking them.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Hey, I'm asking you to like meet with me once a week or every other week, to give of your valuable time.
Yep.
And I know that, some of the mentors I've gone to have been like highly sought after people, and they're already busy. Mm-hmm. So if you felt that, I would just say, one, there's no drawback to just asking. Mm-hmm. You never know what they'll say. First of all, it's a huge honor for someone to come up and say, hey, I see value in your life and I want that. Would you mentor me? That honors them. And they can say no, but still you put it out there, and it's an honor for them more than a burden, even if they're not able to do it.
Yeah.
But then also maybe the person you're looking at for mentoring, Abel said, maybe the mentor who comes is different than you expect.
Yeah.
Often we're looking to the most visible, most recognizable, most sought after people to mentor us. What if there's someone a little quieter or a little bit behind the scenes who you could look to, who could be your mentor? Yeah. We often put on pedestals the public figures and the people that we see most prominently, the highest leaders and things like that. But there's some quietly faithful people who are so worth learning from and growing into if you just look for them. And I like the idea of maybe you just ask them for, hey, I have this specific issue. Could we just get coffee to talk about that? Yep. And you have something specific you want to talk about, so you're not wasting their time. You're not just showing up and being like, oh, what do we talk about? What do we talk about? You have something ready. You're honoring their time with a specific thing you're struggling with, or something you want advice on, or a dream you have, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then maybe it's a one-time thing, but maybe it turns into something more. So it doesn't have to be, I feel like sometimes we place the burden of a whole mentorship, like, oh, this person's going to walk with me for years. And when I'm 50, I'm going to be still having phone calls with them every week. Perhaps that's not what you need or what you'll get. And that's okay. There's still value in that.
Oh, yeah.
So just push yourself, step outside of your comfort zone, especially if you're an introvert.
Yeah.
Realize that you are not a burden, and that this could blossom into something really beautiful.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I'd say.
Sometimes it's just pride too that we have, that like, it's like for me that could be the issue for me, where I'm like, I don't need help in this. I can figure this out. And it's like, dude, like, humble yourself. So for all those out there who have those thoughts, I hear you, I see you, and you gotta, we gotta work on surrendering those thoughts at times.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and even we kind of were talking about this earlier, but you can even have kind of impersonal mentors, people you don't actually know. Like reading has been a form of mentorship for me. Yep. I value someone, their thoughts, the way they think, things like that, and I'll just like, I'm gonna read as many books by this person that I can, or I'll listen to their talks on YouTube or podcasts. Yeah. Once again, that's still someone that I could dangerously be putting on a pedestal.
For sure.
So I have to make sure I'm not. But that's a way to be mentored by someone. A book is you're diving deep into this person's thoughts.
Yeah.
And you are imitating their thought in the way that you are thinking.
Yeah.
And it's a very intimate process, actually. And it could be a good way for you to grow.
Totally.
So yeah, there's so many ways. Yeah. So many ways to grow. Mm-hmm. So many ways to make sure that you are being discipled.
Yeah.
But I think we've come to the end of this episode. Yeah. Next episode, we'll be talking about once we're in a place of healthiness, of healthy discipleship ourselves, how do we then look outward and begin to pour into others? Of course, that already happens while you are discipling yourself. It's not a sharp distinction.
Yeah.
But what does it look like to pour into others and to disciple others? I'm excited for that conversation.
That'll be good.
We hope you'll tune into that. Please, leave a comment. We want to hear from you. Mm-hmm. One of our values is community. We don't want to just be talking into these microphones. We want this to be a tool for connection. Yeah. And we'd love to hear from you. Even if there's any thoughts you have on this topic, anything you'd like to hear us talk about more, and things like that. So thank you for listening.
Yeah.
And for tuning in. We will, we'll see you next time.
See you next time.